How much do you trust your friends? That is the question presented in this show. Alright there guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be covering Tomodachi Game. A show that heavily explores the theme of friendship and trust. Like, do you really know your friends as well as you think? Are they as trustworthy as you've always believed them to be? Well, let's get into that. So, the show starts off with 5 friends: Yuichi, Tenji, Shibei, Shiho, and Kokorogi. These 5 seem to be really good friends. Until one day when they're getting ready to go on a class trip with their school that costs 2 million yen, all 5 of them, out of nowhere, get kidnapped. And they all end up in the same place, which looks like a replica of the classroom they meet up in every morning at school. And they are greeted by this mascot called Manabu-san. He basically is a in-universe character from a horror anime in the show. And his character is the mascot for the Tomodachi Game. As every single member of this friend group is given 2 million yen worth of debt that they have to try and pay off by completing the Tomodachi Game. So, the first task given to them is, there is a circular looking chess piece. Well, no, draft, that was it. Draft is basically like chess, but all the pieces are just circles. And it's on a sheet of paper. One side says yes, and the other side says no. And all they have to do is answer whatever question Manabu asks them. Now, it's a bit like an Ouija board, the way how everyone puts their finger on the same spot and it moves by itself, but it's basically that, just without the moving by itself part. So, all 5 of them have each put a finger on the circular piece. And whatever question Manabu asks them, the correct answer is yes, and they should slide the piece over to yes. But they don't. For some strange reason, every time they move the piece always moves to no, even though all 5 of them want to pick yes. Something is making them pick no. So they end the first game of this Tomodachi Game with the exact same amount of debt, because they all did the same thing. Then we move on to the second game, where it's kind of like a board game, how people can move up a certain amount of places depending on what they do. It's not quite a dice roll, but it works similar. So, basically there's 3 options that our 5 main characters have. Option 1, they can badmouth one of the other people in the group. Option 2, they can badmouth themselves. And number 3, they can do nothing. So the second game is where the bond between these 5 characters starts breaking and they start getting annoyed at each other. And they do indeed start badmouthing each other rather than themselves. And one of the badmouths is extremely terrible that Shiho puts, because what she puts is a secret about Kokorogi that nobody else knew but her. And the badmouth is that Kokorogi, when she was younger, offered up her body to older men for money. And the episode that happens at the very beginning of the episode, it literally gives you a trigger warning. It tells you about the dark topics that are going to be discussed in this episode. Normally, I would think trigger warnings are extremely cringe, but in this case, it's a very serious thing they're talking about. So yeah, the trigger warning is actually necessary for this episode, and it's not the only episode that gets a trigger warning. So it gets to the point where Yuichi is now at the front. Even though the show doesn't try to show you a main character, Yuichi is probably the show's main character. He's the one we see the most of. And one of the bad mouths about him is actually from himself, that he's murdered people in the past. And the way he acts throughout the show, it's believable that he's actually murdered someone because of how insane he can sound at some points. The badmouth originally was about Shibei and how his father is very corrupt, and that Shibei has been corrupted by his father and has murdered someone. But Yuichi then reveals that he has murdered someone. And it's also revealed by Manabu that one of the 5 members of this friend group, or soon to very closely ending friend group as it seems, one of them is a traitor. And they're trying to work out which one of them is the traitor and actually has some sort of idea to what's going on, whereas the other 4, who are not the traitor, do not. It's revealed that the traitor was actually Tenji, and Yuichi came up with a plan in order to expose Tenji as the traitor. So it seemed that Yuichi was way ahead of everyone else and had already figured out that Tenji was the traitor. But he didn't want to say anything until he had the perfect opportunity. So when Tenji goes in to write a badmouth about someone, of which Yuichi told everybody to write the exact same badmouth about one of them. But Yuichi manages to expose the fact that it was actually Tenji who was the traitor all along. And because of that, Yuichi ends up winning the 3rd game and he is at the front of the line. And the 3rd game happens to be down below, which Yuichi has to jump down in order to reach. But for some reason, Tenji feels that he can't let that happen, that he needs to be there as well. And he gave the fangirls of this show a moment to remember as he jumps at Yuichi and forcefully kisses him to make the 2 of them fall down the ledge. Yeah, I bet the fangirls enjoyed that one. We're going a bit mental when Tenji out of nowhere just did that. And so we move on to the 3rd game, which we spend probably the most amount of time in. The game is hide and seek. Sounds pretty harmless, right? Well, this is a bit more of an extreme version of hide and seek. So, there's only 2 members of Group C, which is now what Yuichi and Tenji are part of. And the management of the Tomodachi Game, who have been watching them on monitors this entire time, and have their own groups, become even more important than they did before. So Yuichi and Tenji meet Group K, which has 5 members. What Tenji and Yuichi didn't realise is, if you don't have all 5 members of the Tomodachi Game group that you were in come down to the 3rd game at the same time, you're at a massive disadvantage over your opponents. So it's hide and seek. One member of both groups has to hide, and the other member or members have to find him. Whoever gets found first, their team loses. So Yuichi picks a very good hiding spot for Tenji, of which he almost starves to death because Yuichi took so long to get back to him. He almost starves to death. And Yuichi is trying to figure out a way to win, despite it's basically he's on his own. But the management aren't too pleased about how disadvantaged Yuichi is. So they throw a spanner in the mix, and one of the members of the management, Maria, joins the battle. She joins Group C, which is Yuichi's group. And Yuichi basically uses her as a pawn in his sick, twisted game. And it does work to great effect. But in order to get up to that point, Yuichi has to try and figure out a way to make the members of Group K, who seem a very tight-knitted friend group, just like his friend group did until this Tomodachi game began. He's trying to find a way to cause tension within their friend group and make them stop and make them fall out with each other. That was his goal. And the so-called captain of Group K is the one that goes to hide, but it's later revealed that a different member of Group K was the actual leader, and his name is Kei Shinomiya, which I found hilarious because he's got the first name of Shirogane's sister from Love is War and the last name of Kaguya from Love is War. It's like Kei Shinomiya and it's like Kei Shirogane and Kaguya Shinomiya rolled into one, but this is a guy, despite having the names of two female Love is War characters. I found that quite funny. And he actually finds Tenji. But little did they know that Group K had already lost, because at the very beginning, Manabu gives both teams this button that if you press the button, your team immediately loses. Which the so-called captain of Group K had already done because of Yuichi's sadistic nature. I mean, Yuichi isn't above doing anything. He even pushed Maria off the edge of a cliff, which would have killed her if two of the members of Group K didn't stop chasing him and save her instead. Like, Yuichi does not care. He will do whatever he has to in order to win. So he calls up the member of Group K that is hiding and says that he will break the fingers of one of the other members of Group K because he defected to Group C. He changed groups. And if you physically attack a member of the opposition group, your team immediately loses. However, attacking your own group is completely fair game, and you can kick the crap out of whoever you want as long as they're in your own group. So Yuichi ties up the member of Group K to make sure that doesn't happen. So what he does is, when he's talking on the phone to the member of Group K that's hiding, Yuichi breaks his own little finger, but makes the member of Group K who's hiding believe he broke the other guy from Group K's finger when he actually broke his own finger. This pushed the guy hiding from Group K over the line, and he pressed the give up button before Kei Shinomiya found Tenji. And during this hide and seek game, when Yuichi finally does return with food and water for Tenji actually tells Yuichi that he's actually done this before. This is not his first Tomodachi Game rodeo. He's actually played it before. And the Tomodachi Game is actually what got his father killed. but you're not allowed to speak about the Tomodachi game after if you complete it. You're not allowed to tell anyone else about it. So after everyone gets out, Tenji and Yuichi go back to their classroom and see Kokorogi, and she says that something has happened to Shibei. So the two of them get their asses over to Shibei's house and find that Shibei has murdered his own father. Remember earlier that I said Shibei was accused of murder in the second game, but then Yuichi says he has murdered people? Yeah, maybe that was predicting the future, because Shibei then actually murders somebody. Or at least that's what we think. We haven't actually seen what happened yet. So somebody impersonating Manabu calls Yuichi and tells him that he's kidnapped Kokorogi, which he has. And if Yuichi wants to see Kokorogi alive again, he has to come alone, which he does. But Yuichi was suspicious of this Manabu because he didn't sound truly authentic to the Manabu that we've been hearing throughout the rest of the show. So Yuichi arrives, and this guy called Kuroki and a bunch of his lackeys, as I'm going to call them, are there, holding Kokorogi captive, and give Yuichi or Kokorogi 3 challenges of who's going to take the brunt of them. It ends up being Yuichi. He gets punched in the face 3 times by a really strong guy. He gets 3 of his fingernails ripped off. And he even gets 3 stabs through the hand with a knife. And he hasn't died from that. And then he gives Kuroki a challenge to play rock, paper, scissors. Due to the fact that Yuichi's right hand is barely functionable anymore, he tells him that he can't go scissors on his right hand. He can only throw rock or paper. What Kuroki doesn't realise is that Yuichi never said he couldn't use his left hand, which has been completely left alone. Or at least he hasn't had anything sliced off it. So Kuroki throws paper and Yuichi throws scissors, and he says that the punishment for losing is he gets to cut off all 4 fingers and thumb of Kuroki's hand. Which he instantly sells out his friends to try and say that maybe one of them should swap places with him due to the fact that they'd only lose 1 finger opposed to 5. Then management from the Tomodachi Game walk in, arrest all the people working with Kuroki and Kuroki himself. Yuichi then passes out from the amount of blood loss that he'd sustained during this altercation. And then we have Tenji and Kokorogi set out to go and see what has happened to Shibei, as Shibei is in a courthouse ready to start the 4th game. And that's where the show stops. It doesn't really end. Like, the season does not end, per se. It kind of just comes to a stop. But this is indeed the end of the 1st season of Tomodachi Game. So there's got to be a 2nd season, surely. Like, that is not an ending at all. So it has to have a 2nd season. But that is all that there is for Tomodachi Game at the moment. What did I think of the show? It was quite interesting. It had a bit of Danganronpa vibes to it, minus the death part. Minus the being killed if you lose part. But yeah, it was very interesting with all the mystery surrounding it. Would I say it's a contender for Anime of the Year? Definitely not. It wasn't amazing. It was okay, but nothing groundbreaking. And that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you have, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and until next time, catch you later.